Hello, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, in his out, in betweeners. It's me, Dan. Welcome back to another PAP Reports, the bad bits. It's Sunday, the 16th of August. On Monday, it was announced that the constable who was filmed kneeling on a young man's neck outside Leeds United's Elland Road Stadium could be facing criminal investigation. I spoke about this briefly a week ago last Friday, but at the time I hadn't been able to find the video, although now I have a copy. The 17-year-old, yes, 17-year-old, was also sprayed with incapacitance spray as several constables fumbled around trying to restrain him. And isn't it amazing how many police can't even handle a teenager these days? Even with 4 or 5 of them, they still can't deal with an unruly teenager without resorting to weapons or dirty street fighting tactics. Even members of the public tried to step in to help the boy, but were forced back by the constable's colleagues, instead of them realising that the cops' actions were excessive and trying to stop them themselves. In a statement by the IOPC, they say that a West Yorkshire police officer has been advised that he is subject to a criminal investigation by the IOPC, following the arrest of a 17-year-old made outside Leeds United football ground on the 17th of July. The officer will be interviewed by our investigators on suspicion of common assault and also investigated for gross misconduct. Video footage showing part of the arrest in Elland Road was shared widely on social media and shows a 17-year-old boy being restrained on the ground by officers. In the footage, an officer uses their knee at one point to restrain the teenager. One thing to remember here, folks, is that common assault, or a Section 39, which is Section 39 of the Criminal Justice Act 1988, is the least serious of all assault charges. We spoke about this recently over another incident. In fact, common assault can occur even when no actual physical contact has been made. And there needs to be proof that the defendant caused the victim to fear that immediate physical violence would be used against them. So this could be in the form of a verbal threat combined with a raised fist or something similar to that. But yet physical contact was made in an egregious and excessive manner. So how are they able to get away with charging these police for the least serious of assault charges is utterly disgraceful. However, the cretin has been suspended while the investigation is ongoing. A nice few paid weeks off before being told he did nothing wrong, no doubt. We'll of course be following up on this story when more information becomes available. Metropolitan Police Constable PC Gus Mirams is a racist and homophobic prick, or as I like to call it, a discriminative cunt. Mirams was shown the door from the Met last week after a misconduct hearing which followed an investigation into comments that he made on Facebook posts linked to Britain First, including news stories about police taking part in Pride events. Mirams is said to have liked and commented on posts made by and on Britain First Facebook page in July 2018. A year later, whilst on restricted duties, he was said to have made homophobic and racially offensive comments whilst in a public gallery at an unrelated misconduct hearing. However, his comments were overheard by 2 members of the public and a security guard, in which a misconduct panel said that in both circumstances, his language could reasonably be perceived to be abusive, oppressive, victimising or offensive, and did not treat certain communities with fairness, respect and impartiality. There's been no mention as to whether Mirams has been barred from policing or not, and unfortunately I do not have an image of Gus Mirams either, so you will have to remember the name rather than the face, I'm afraid, in case you come across him yourselves. Imagine being the second most senior police constable in the country, defending a major VIP paedophile ring inquiry to the media, and the thing that worries you the most is where you should put your hat when speaking to the press. I think it's clear that this would highlight the complete lack of any regard many of the so-called top cops have for such serious incidents, and you may be forgiven if you thought this was just a hypothetical situation. It's not just a hypothetical situation. The Met Police was heavily criticised for the cost of the Carl Beach paedophile ring investigation after spending reached some £2.5 million. Deputy Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Stephen House, was due to address the press to defend the spending when his thoughts turned to his hat. A Freedom of Information request asking for emails showed that the Assistant Commissioner was in contact with a friend asking whether and how he should wear his hat at the interview, which you may think irrelevant, and you would be right, but I fear we would be thinking the relevance lay in different places, because an interview over such serious matters should be the only thing on someone's mind, and not how to wear or carry the damn hat. In fact, 73-year-old Harvey Proctor, ex-Tory MP who was falsely accused of child murder, said the Met Police pays more attention to presentation and media manipulation than to truth and facts. Bang on. This is just another example of them trying to hide their faults of their tawdry and very expensive investigation. Sir Stephen should eat his hat or hang it up entirely. And I find it astonishing that what seemed to be of more importance was his fashion and how he looked over the actual issue of how much was spent and why the police didn't suss the false allegations out sooner. 51-year-old Carl Beach was sentenced to 18 years for perverting the course of justice and fraud. It's just a shame that the police don't get such hefty sentencing when they do the same. Avon and Somerset Police seem to be going for the record of not naming constables in the misconduct hearing, as yet again they failed to name a constable accused of making an Islamophobic joke. Known only as Special Constable J, he is said to have made discriminatory comments and told a discriminatory joke during a 4-day training course at Police HQ in January, whilst he was discussing the shooting down of a civilian plane by Iran. All 176 people on board Ukraine International Airlines flight PS752 died when it was shot down by an Iranian missile on January the 8th. During a discussion about how the British government would respond given there were British nationals among the dead, Special Constable J allegedly said something along the lines of, "Well, not really, they are just Mohammeds," according to police. It is also alleged the officer read out a joke that was on his mobile phone to some of the other course participants and one of the trainers. Police said that the topic of the joke was Donald Trump, saying that he were planning to start World War III by killing a large number of Muslims and a blonde woman with large tits. The punchline of the joke was that in response to be asked why he planned to kill the woman, Donald Trump replies, "See, I told you no one cares about Muslims." Very Special Constable J's hearing was heard on the 12th and 13th. And in a public hearing, the misconduct panel ruled that the constable did in fact make a joke and another derogatory comment during a training course in January, which was discriminatory and caused offence to his colleagues. They subsequently concluded Special Constable J breached the standards of professional behaviour concerning equality and diversity, authority, respect and courtesy, and discreditable conduct. The panel heard that the only appropriate outcome was to hand Very Special Constable J his P45, effective immediately. Virtue signalling propagandists, the BBC, felt the sharp end of the stick at the weekend after the use of a certain word on air received almost 19,000 complaints, apparently. All from other virtue signallers, as you will soon realise, along with realising just how these people actually turn on one another at the drop of a hat. There is absolutely no honour between these people. They will drop you in the shit just as soon as look at you, even after standing shoulder to shoulder with you. I fucking love it. Anyway, back to it. The incident happened during a BBC News report in which reporter Fiona Lambdin said, "Just to warn you, you are about to hear highly offensive language because as the man ran away, they held racial abuse, calling him a nigger." And she spoke about an attack in Bristol. In a statement on Sunday, the BBC's Director General, Lord Tony Hall, said every organisation should be able to acknowledge when it has made a mistake. We made one here. In an email to all BBC staff, Hall wrote, "It should be clear that the BBC's intention was to highlight an alleged racist attack. This is important journalism which the BBC should be reporting on, and we will continue to do so. Yet, despite these good intentions, I recognise that we have ended up creating distress amongst many people. The BBC now accepts that we should have taken a different approach at the time of broadcast, and we are very sorry for that. We will now be strengthening our guidance on offensive language across our output. The incident saw Radio 1 Extra presenter Sideman, whose real name is David Whiteley, quit the BBC, effective immediately. Whiteley said the action and the defence of the action feels like a slap in the face of our community. In an Instagram video, the DJ said, "This is an error in judgment where I can't just smile with you through the process and act like everything is okay. I'm happy working with organisations until we all get it right, but this feels like more than getting it wrong." But, and let's be realistic here, the use of the word was not said in an offensive manner. It was actually said to highlight what was actually said. I mean, we're all adults. Well, at least I thought we were. We should be able to discuss things in the right setting without using words as a direct attack on people. But the fairies, buttercups and virtue signalers simply used it as an opportunity to attack someone else, because that's all they seem to know how to do. Even someone who works for an organisation that practically pushes their very propaganda the virtue signalers want. Saying the word nigger is not offensive. It's in practically every single rap song, even from black rappers who also complain about racism, but yet they feed these words to our children and then bitch and whine about it when someone uses the word. I could completely understand it if Fiona Lambdin called the man she was talking to a nigger, but she didn't. She used it in context and is exactly the same, in fact, as it would be expected to be used in court in front of a judge. It is done that so people can understand the context it was used in, and I, for one, as someone who brings you information on my reports, will continue to use words, even if they are hard for people to swallow, so that people know exactly what's said. But they will be done in a way to bring context and meaning to the subject I'm talking about. How can we as a society really move forward if we're not allowed to discuss these incidents? We must be able to. These words are used in films all the time and no one complains about them. And in films they're actually done in a way that would show them being used as both insults and as greetings between black people. So why is it in films that it's acceptable, but as a newsreader explaining what was said is not? In my opinion, it's nothing to do with any offence caused, because it clearly wasn't said in an offensive or derogatory manner. Maybe people simply weren't ready to hear BBC saying a naughty word, but they did. And the BBC should have stuck by their decision to have used it in the report. Folding like a wet paper bag in order to appease the snowflakes and buttercups simply proves again that the BBC is not fit for purpose, and their sole intention is to now help fuel and divide by making it now appear that we can't even have adult discussions about serious incidents or situations anymore. This whole act of people calling in is cretinous. The BBC folding is cretinous, and that twat that left Radio 1 Extra is a moron. I mean, what's next? We're not allowed to say the word terrorist? Well, we have to start calling them life challenged? I mean, get a grip, people. There's only one way to move forward from everyone's perspective, and that is to act like fucking adults and debate, discuss, explain and learn. And we can't do that if propagandists keep trying to make out that we are all terrible people, because a few of our society are so weak fucking hearted and spineless that it can't even stand by the decisions to use the actual words that were spoken in a report about an incident. Unfucking believable. Now, we already know that police are set targets to achieve. How many cars to stop, how many searches to carry out. But I never ever thought I would hear the day that rape prosecutions would become one of their targets. Targets are dangerous to people like you and me, as it makes us potential victims for the unlawful stop and searches. But can you imagine being hauled up on a rape charge simply because the police want to hit their targets? It's happened before. Don't kid yourself into thinking it won't happen. This is what Boris Johnson is planning by giving the Crown Prosecution Service quotas for how many suspects they take to court. You know, don't worry if they're guilty or not. Just have faith in the justice system. The more we prosecute, the more we send to prison. Makes it look like we're doing something good. Figures are said to show that rape prosecutions have fallen to their lowest level since records began, and this is something we discussed recently after support charities spoke out about less people being inclined to report their assault due to the police's ever-invasive policy of intelligence gathering. Intelligence, even when the intelligence, when they try to mine from people, is irrelevant to the situation or crime. So it's already been established why there is less rape prosecutions. Well, that and the fact that the police are afraid to go after many rapists because of their protected characteristics. But rather than fix the actual problem, they're now trying to create a new one. A total of 2,102 reached court in 2019 to 2020, 59% decline since 2016. This was despite reports of rape increasing. This was despite reports of rape increasing by a third to 55,130. Since 2016 to 2017, referrals from the police to the CPS have dropped by 40%. The new targets will be set by the Prime Minister's Crime and Justice Task Force. They will propose the CPS prosecutes a greater proportion of rape cases every year. This is all true, by the way, folks. I kid you not. An end-to-end review of how the criminal justice responds to rape and sexual violence is expected to report back later this year, when the full details are expected to also be announced. A government spokesman said, "We are determined to restore faith in the justice system and give victims of rape the confidence everything will be done to bring offenders to justice. We will continue to work with the police to look at ways to improve their role in the investigation and prosecution of rape." Trust me, fitting people up for rape to hit targets is not going to restore faith in anything. You need to look at past decisions that took place before the decline in order to see the reasons, not ignore it and make up some crazy batshit plan to increase them again. This is simply insane as far as I'm concerned. If something changes, you look at what happened before the change in order to find a correlation. You don't simply ignore it and make up some other mad bullshit. I'm flabbergasted. West Mercia police have revealed that last year more than 1,800 child sex offences were recorded. That's just shy of 5 every single day. Every single day. And that's said to be an increase of 54% over the past 5 years, with the NSPCC fearing that the number could rise further as childline counselling sessions have tripled during the lockdown. The NSPCC said there were 73,500 child sex offences, or 200 every day, recorded across the UK in 2019 and 2020. Recorded offences included rape, grooming and sexual assault. West Mercia Police Head of Crime and Vulnerabilities, Chief Superintendent Damien Barrett, said, "Our absolute priority is safeguarding those who are vulnerable, and there is no doubt that this includes children. Over the past few years, we have worked diligently with our partner agencies to make sure we protect those who are at risk of harm." That's just shy of 5 every single day. Over the past few years, more than 18,000 people across the counties covered by West Mercia Police have been trained to know the signs of exploitation and vulnerability, and what to do if they suspect a child or vulnerable person is at risk. This training has been delivered by professionals whose role brings them into contact with children and young people and encourages them to report any concerns they may have. That's just shy of 5 every single day. We have teams dedicated to protecting vulnerable people, with officers specially trained to deal with the sensitivities of these complex investigations, and have teams who work on child exploitation across the force, with officers working closely with safeguarding partners to proactively investigate those exploiting children and young people through child sexual exploitation and wider criminal exploitation. That's just shy of 5 every single day. Every single day. All but one of the 45 police forces across the UK provided the NSPCC with the latest data on sexual offences against under 18s after a Freedom of Information request. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was West Yorkshire Police who failed to provide any information. I'm sure they won't have the manpower to gather all the information they've tried to bury. You see, police, these are the crimes that you should be pursuing. Crimes that actually hurt people physically, not chasing people around the country because their opinion doesn't fit with the latest narrative, or because you're on some virtue signalling mission to garner favour from your protected group of the weak. When I hear numbers like this, it physically makes me feel sick and simply makes me want to expose the police and their corrupt practices even more. I mean, do the cops who go knocking on doors because someone said something someone else didn't like in a tweet actually have kids themselves, or are they conditioned to simply ignore the fact that these kinds of horrific crimes are taking place? You, the police watching this video, you have a conscience. I know you hide it well, but you do. You know what's right and what's wrong. generally speaking. Not so sure about the others we report on here, but you have choices. You can choose to do your master's bidding as cannon fodder, following their orders, even though you know them to be wrong, only to be tossed to the wolves when it all goes tits up. Or you can stand up and be counted, stand up and be respected. Maybe not by the low-life corrupt bastards you currently work for, but by the public, who will stand by you for standing up against the bullshit, for speaking out. It's what we want. It's what we need. And it's what you must do in order to prevent this once great British police force from being destroyed any further. Do the right thing. Stop chasing spurious charges. Stop ignoring the real crimes that are affecting our communities, and stop having bitch fits when someone simply doesn't drop to their knees in respect to your uniform. That uniform holds very little respect anymore, and the only way it will ever hold respect again is if you actually start doing the right thing. The London Borough of Haringey, an area that has come up a few times in recent reports for one thing or another, is back in the spotlight. This time Haringey Council are really showing themselves up for the cretinous bastards they really are, after trying to persuade a court of appeal that a man who was sexually abused when he was 13 in 1980 by a PE teacher by the name of Andrew Adams at Highgate Wood School had not suffered any long-term trauma. The victim was initially raped and scared and confused, and he confided in his teacher. Adams told the boy that the rape just proved he was gay. Everyone would hate him, but he would be his friend. He then proceeded to groom and then sexually abuse the victim for years. The teacher used to take the boy to Hampstead Heath and the public toilets to make him watch men having sex. The man believes other staff at the school suspected the teacher, but nobody investigated. He became distant from his friends and family, and the abuse and sexual activity continued until he was 21. After the abuse stopped and both went on with their lives, the victim suffered multiple breakdowns, whilst his abuser, Andrew Adams, went on to become deputy head of the Highgate Wood School and even had a wing of the school named after him. It was only after the victim sought the help of a psychiatrist that he disclosed the abuse and then went to the police. In 2014, Adams ended up in court and pleaded guilty to charges of assault and buggery and sentenced to 12 years, later reduced on appeal to 8 years. Although by this point his victim was so mentally damaged he was unable to work. His victim did, however, instruct a solicitor to sue Adams and Haringey Council. The council's insurers tried to have the claims dismissed, arguing that Haringey Council was not responsible for Andrew Adams' acts, claiming that because the victim had left the school for a brief period, aged 15 in 1982, but continued to go on sailing trips with pupils there because he had consented to sex with Adams, that he returned to the school to do his A-levels because Adams no longer taught him PE, and the assaults could not have caused any long-term trauma because they had not been violent. What kind of sick cunt says that? As if a sexual attack needs to be violent in order for it to cause trauma to a child. These are the kinds of people that work to protect abusers and rapists. Dirty fucking cunts. Thankfully though, the Court of Appeal, as I said, dismissed the claims from the council's insurers, and the man finally got some compensation for the decades of mental anguish that he'd suffered after the court awarded him more than £1 million. Now, I have to say, if compensation for offences were really designed to compensate and deter others from doing the same kind of things, then the judge who presided over this case gets my support for the award. Although it will be a mere dent in the council's pocket, it will make them think twice about doing the right thing sooner rather than later, and hopefully will encourage them to up their game and really monitor and look into their school staff, as this kind of thing is not as rare as you might think. Avon and Somerset Police Constable 46-year-old PC Darren Bond appeared at Gloucester Crown Court on the 10th, where he admitted charges of possessing, making and distributing indecent images of children through online chat platforms. Bond was suspended in November 2017 and has no doubt been on paid leave for 2.5 years. Some of the images Bond was found in possession of were Category A. Chief Superintendent Carolyn Belafonte, Head of Investigation, said this officer had pleaded guilty to wholly abhorrent offences and we utterly condemn his behaviour. Downloading or sharing indecent images of children perpetuates this vile industry and encourages offenders to commit acts of abuse. There is no place to hide for those who commit this kind of offence. His crimes have had a lasting impact on those who worked with him, who were completely unaware of the deplorable offences he was committing away from work online. A full safeguarding review has been carried out to identify and address the risks posed by his offending. Superintendent Simon Wilstead, head of professional standards, said any conviction for a criminal offence against a police officer leads to a loss of public trust and confidence in policing. Given that this conviction relates to serious offences relating to indecent images of children, and now the criminal justice process is almost complete, we'll move swiftly to hold a special case misconduct hearing, which will consider dismissal as an option. We need to rebuild public trust in our service quickly and demonstrating that this type of behaviour is not acceptable in society and is certainly not conducive to the role of a police officer, whose priority should always be to protect and serve the public. Bond will be sentenced at Gloucester Crown Court on the 21st of September. And it'll be interesting to see whether he gets a real sentence or whether his service in the police will sway the judge into giving a weak and pathetic sentence. I still think this is the kind of crime that questions whether hanging should be brought back. This week saw the release of information against allegations against Essex Police Constable after an investigation found inexcusable failures in a paedophile ring case. The investigation into a historic paedophile ring is set to be reopened for the third time in 5 years after a series of failures were found in an investigation of Essex Police's handling of the case. The review of their handling of the case comes after a year-long review which followed a complaint to the IOPC by a victim over the way his case was handled. In fact, 9 out of the 15 complaints were upheld, and 3 Essex Police Constables now face nothing more than management advice. 9 out of 15 complaints upheld, and 3 cops get told not to do it again. The investigation found, amongst other things, that the force gave a historic paedophile ring investigation to an inexperienced officer who was then not properly supervised. It found that there were inexcusable delays in the man's case, with more than a year elapsing between him coming forward and police completing his interview. They found the man's allegations against a retired police officer who he was able to identify were never logged as a crime, and lines of inquiry about him were never investigated. This was despite the fact that a year earlier, unbeknownst to the complainant, someone else had made a similar allegation to another organisation about the same retired constable. The man's allegations against other abusers were also not properly investigated. Now, those are currently the only allegations out of the 9 that I've been able to find. The paedophile ring investigation itself found that ringleaders Dennis King and Brian Tanner, both now dead, were given extremely generous plea bargains at the last minute, and no other abusers were pursued. It later came to light that Dennis King was a registered police grass. Surprise, surprise. I mean, what better way to get away with your crimes than being in the police's pocket, so they look the other way to your horrific crimes in order for you to grass up other people. Now, there is a lot more to this story, which in fact has been turned into a podcast called Unfinished. And I will link to the podcast in the description with the other links to my sources. There it will be explained far better than I can do in the short amount of time I have in these reports, but it is worth a listen to. A dirty bastard paedophile has walked free from court this week after the judge heard he was vulnerable. 67-year-old married father Alan Boardman was convicted of downloading indecent images of children after police received intelligence there may be indecent images available for sharing online at their family's house in Amanda Road in Rain Hill. When police went to the address on April the 11th last year, they explained why they were there and asked Boardman, who was present with his stepson, if they had any knowledge of the material, to which they both said no. However, when asked whether they had ever seen such images when using peer-to-peer software, Boardman replied, "Yes, I have." The intelligence police received came from Boardman's wife after she revealed her husband had confessed to her that he had been looking at child abuse photos. When the computer was analysed, police found evidence of 24 indecent images, 6 category A, depicting rape of girls aged 8 to 13, 6 category B showing girls aged 7 to 10, and 12 category C images of girls aged 2 to 6. A further 65 extreme porn files were also detected, along with evidence of search terms he used, including preteen and incest. When questioned, Boardman suggested he looked at the files to gain insight into what motivated a sexual abuser to molest someone he knew and that he denied that he was sexually aroused or attracted by children and said he was disgusted. When questioned about downloading images, Boardman stated he was curious and felt it was humorous. Humorous. Fucking humorous. What a sick cunt. And the judge actually let him walk, even after telling him he found the images amusing. Boardman, who now lives in Leon Close, St Helens, admitted 3 counts of making and 1 count of possessing indecent images of children, plus possessing extreme pornographic material. His defence solicitor urged the judge to spare his client jail and follow the recommendations of the pre-sentence report so he could face up to the sort of denial that he had expressed. Judge Garrett Burns, sitting at Liverpool Crown Court, told Boardman, "Although you are to some extent in denial about your behaviour, I have no doubt, having read everything in this case, that you were motivated by a sexual interest in children." The judge said it was an aggravating feature that Boardman had been downloading the indecent files as far back as 2012. He said viewing and possessing these sort of images serves only to fuel the market and further encourages their production, and each image, of course, represents an abused child. Judge Burns said a report indicated Boardman had a good prospect of rehabilitation. He was of previous good character, had full credit for his guilty pleas, and was not in a good health. The judge said the impact of prison would therefore be great upon him. Isn't that the fucking point of prison? And he had to take into account the impact of serving a jail sentence during the coronavirus pandemic. Judge Byrne handed Boardman 12 months in jail, suspended for 2 years, with a 40-day rehabilitation activity requirement. 12 months for someone who thought child abuse images were humorous, for someone who's in denial that they have done anything wrong, which makes them even more of a fucking danger, and then to have that suspended is an absolute fucking disgrace. Now, I say it all the time as it gives some idea on how pathetic these judgments are. I was handed an 18-month sentence for a first offence of growing some weed, suspended for 2 years, and this filthy cunt gets 12 months suspended. This judge needs removing, or the sentence needs appealing for a real sentence. Now, we've spoken a few times in PAP Reports about the Manchester grooming gangs, most recently about how one of the victims came face to face with one of her attackers in an Asda store, despite him losing an appeal against deportation back to Pakistan in 2018. Well, unfortunately, we're back with Manchester Police and yet another investigation into the inept way that the force handled the cases and investigations, which was started after the death of 15-year-old Victoria Agoglia, a girl under the care of Manchester City Council who reported being raped and injected with heroin by a 50-year-old Asian man. This time the investigation by the IOPC is into the supervision and handling of Operation Augusta, which was launched in 2004 after Victoria's death. 3 of Greater Manchester Police's former senior cunts are being investigated after concerns were raised in January by Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham over the conduct and decision-making of some officers involved in that investigation. Quite why it's taken this long to figure out it was a complete debacle is beyond me, especially when people have been calling it a fucking joke for years. Operation Augusta identified at least 57 victims and 97 potential suspects, and what was called a compelling picture of the systemic exploitation of looked after children in the care system was established by detectives. However, a report received by Mayor Andy Burnham said that senior officers at Greater Manchester Police chose to under-resource the investigation, which led to it being closed in 2005. The IOPC said an investigation has been launched into the supervision and setting of direction in Operation Augusta in regards to 3 former senior officers. 2 of the officers have since retired and a third now works for another organisation. I mean, they obviously knew this day was coming and ran for the hills, the lazy, spineless bastards. Steve Noonan, IOPC Director of Major Investigations, said, "The review raised many questions about the actions of those involved in Operation Augusta. We have now decided it is necessary to investigate the individual conduct of these 3 former Greater Manchester Police officers who were all involved in either supervising or setting the direction of the operation. Though the content of the mayoral review has been analysed as part of our decision to begin an investigation, it was not a specific investigation into the actions of the officers involved. We now need to establish and examine all the available evidence. The investigation is in its early stages." Which is the normal scripted bullshit we would expect to hear from the completely impartial and totally independent IOPC. This is no doubt going to be a long investigation. I doubt most people are under no illusion that very little will come of the investigation, much like the others, including the original one, so I won't be holding my breath that any of these senior police constables will be held accountable for their failings. But obviously, I wanted to report on it anyway, so we have a record here on the channel as to when this was originally reported. A paedophile that was allowed to walk from court twice has finally been sent to prison. I guess even a paedophile protecting judge has their limits. Timothy Cousins has twice previously been caught downloading indecent images of children being sexually abused. Yet both times the 32-year-old of Olivia Street in Bootle was spared jail and given a chance to change his ways. Olivia Street in Bootle. I used to live on that road. I hope that cunt weren't there when I was there. I mean, I don't recognise him, don't fuck, but yeah. Cousins was first convicted of possessing indecent images in December 2015, for which he was given a 20-month sentence, suspended for 2 years, in January 2016. He was also made subject to a 10-year sexual harm prevention order meant to restrict his use of the internet and prevent him from offending again. But he was convicted of downloading more photos of children and breaching both his suspended sentence and his sexual harm prevention order in January 2017, which should have seen him locked up for his complete disregard of his sentencing condition. But of course, the nice judge could see deep down that Cousins was a decent guy who just needed to be helped and guided in the right way to overcome his perversion to getting off over images of young children being abused. So he gave him another chance by giving him another suspended sentence on top of the one he already had, bearing in mind the conditions of a suspended sentence is that if you re-offend within the suspension period, you go to jail for the full term that was imposed. On July the 2nd last year, a female police officer who specialised in working with sex offenders visited his home to check he was complying with the order. Cousins confessed he had been using the Grindr app, which he had since deleted, and Google Drive online storage, which he was banned from doing. When his phone was checked, police found 24 indecent images of children, which included 20 photos and 4 videos of boys and girls aged 4 to 14. You see this, judges? Hello, Wiggies. Yeah, you bunch of fat pompous cunts who sit there in your robes on your £140,000 wage. This is what happens when you don't lock these sick, vile bastards up. Or you're busy locking up someone for stealing to feed their family, or begging because they're homeless. You're letting paedophiles walk from court on suspended fucking sentences. It's you that should be suspended from a fucking lamppost, along with the paedophiles that you're so intent on protecting. The files found on Cousins' device included 7 Category A videos showing children being raped, 10 Category B photos and 7 Category C files, which maybe they were even shared with him by a judge, who knows. Paul Woods, prosecuting, said one Category A video showed a boy aged approximately 4, while others included children aged between 6 and 13 years old. Cousins admitted 3 counts of downloading and 1 count of possessing indecent images of children, plus 2 counts of breaching his sexual harm prevention order. Mr. Woods said Cousins, who has 2 previous convictions for 9 offences, had not actually used the Grindr or the Google Drive for any illegal purposes. Like that matters. Judge Byrne said when he passed sentence that it seems to me you've been given every possible opportunity to address your underlying behaviour, but you failed to do so. The supervision you may have ended, but it's clear you failed to learn the necessary skills to stop your offending in this way, and sex offenders programme you have done have not worked in your case. The custody threshold has been passed, and in my view there can be no more suspended terms of imprisonment in your case. Cousins was finally given a custodial sentence he should have had, although with the added offences his 16 months in prison still seems like the judge is trying to do him favour. 53-year-old former Labour councillor for Wigan West, Joseph Shaw of Dickinson Street in Wigan, has been jailed for 5.5 years after branding himself Pedo Master Trainer, being part of an online pedo network and being found in possession of thousands of child abuse images. In fact, Shaw admitted having made 3,114 Category A decent images of children between January 1st, 2013 and July 29th, 2019, 1,729 category B images, 2,251 category C images, 105 prohibited images of children, and 98 extreme pornographic images involving people and animals. He admitted distributing 5 category A, 5 category B, and 2 category C decent images of children between the same dates, and also pleaded guilty to breaching a sexual offences prevention order by having equipment for recording images and making photographic images of children under 16. Along with that impressive list of vileness, former Labour councillor Shaw was previously jailed in 2009 after police found an illegal gun and child abuse images at his home, and had even boasted about training other paedophiles, giving out advice on how to abuse children. Isn't it a shame there wasn't a terrible accident in 2009 when someone found that gun in Shaw's home? Shaw attended court on Wednesday the 12th of August, where the court heard that Shaw had used the devices to share indecent images and discuss child abuse with others on messaging platforms including Kik and Telegram as far back as January 2013. He even set up chat rooms with numerous participants in which graphic conversations about child abuse took place. Shaw went under the guise of a variety of nicknames, including the Pedo Master Trainer, while another referred to his interest in nepophilia, which means the sexual attraction towards babies and toddlers between the age of birth and 4 to 5 years. While examining his devices, police uncovered messages in which Shaw had told others it was the only way he got horny. Mr. Hayhoe added his main obsession was with babies rather than older children. When he was asked by the users if he felt guilty, and he described it as a chemical urge men have, it's nature's way. Mr. Hayhoe told the court that Shaw had bragged about abuse he had carried out himself, although there was no evidence to suggest it was anything more than a fantasy. Shaw initially told police he had only joined the platforms to share legitimate images and discuss music. He tried to explain his behaviour by saying he lived alone and was lonely. Sentencing Shaw, Judge Graham Smith said, "I have many times described it as an epidemic of child pornography in our society." Yeah, perpetuated by the pathetic sentences that are handed out. He said, "I have to say, in the 5 years I have spent sitting in this position, this is one of the worst cases I've seen." Well, maybe you should have a word with some of your buddies who seem to be doing whatever they can to allow these pieces of shit to go on reoffending. Judge Graham Smith continued, in particular the fact that the majority relate to babies or toddlers suffering the most extreme form of sexual abuse. It is impossible for any right-minded individual to comprehend how anyone could look at these images without feeling disgusted and outraged. But yet so many people are hell-bent on giving these dirty cunts chance after chance, instead of simply putting them in jail in general population and having done with it. A very big thank you to all of the channel supporters. Without your support and encouragement, I wouldn't be able to do these videos. And that's all I have for you in today's Too Much for YouTube. Please like, share, comment and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, as I'm certain many of you will. And until next time, stay safe, look after each other, film the police, and of course, other officials. Good night, all. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you like the content and you'd like to help support the channel, you can do so. In the description of every video there are some links to ways that you're able to help support the channel so I can continue putting out content. If you're unable to help us in that way, hit that subscribe button up the top there. If you haven't already, become a subscriber. That is support enough. Share the videos, comment, like, it all helps. If you're looking for something else to watch, up top there is my latest video. Down the bottom there is a video that YouTube recommends for you.